This continued weakness in the U.S. economy, are people right to start to be concerned about the dollar?
Well, they are, of course, and the dollar is a very weak currency except for all the others. So there is a general sort of lack of confidence in currencies and a move away from currencies into real assets. The Chinese are continuing to run a big trade surplus, and they're still accumulating assets, and basically the renminbi is permanently undervalued because it's tied to the dollar. There is a diversification from assets that normally held by central banks into other assets, especially in the area of commodities. So there is a push in gold, there's a strength in oil, and that is in a way a flight from currencies.
Is there going to be sort of a tipping point, a moment at which the dollar is fatally weakened, or does it just sort of carry on?
Well, it's difficult as long as as long as the renminbi is tied to the dollar. I don't see how the decline in the dollar can go too far. Now, of course, to some extent, it's very helpful because with the U.S. consumers saving more and spending less, exports can be a way for the U.S. economy to be balanced. So an orderly decline of the dollar is actually desirable.
Does it at some point need also to decline against the renminbi? Does there need to be some sort of a new global currency deal?
Yes. No, I believe that basically the system is broke and needs to be reconstituted. We cannot afford to have the kind of chronic and mounting imbalances in international finance. So you need a new currency system.
Do you think it's possible to persuade China to allow the renminbi to become stronger?
I think that they would be, they have been agitating for it, so I would take them at their word and use the special drawing rights more often, and make the renminbi, even though it's not convertible, part of the SDR. In other words, it should be one of the currencies used in the special drawing right arrangement, and that would bring them in.
And that's possible even with the renminbi not being convertible?
Yes, yes, yes. It has been considered before, and I think the Brazilian real should be also part of it. I think that a number of currencies which constitute the basket can be and should be increased.
And what about the American concern that aiding and abetting this move away from the dollar as the world's reserve currency ultimately means a weakening of the U.S. economy?
No, I think that is. I mean, we did have great benefits from it, but we have abused it, and I don't think we can continue abusing it anyhow. So it is not necessarily in our interest to have the dollar as the sole world currency, because as the world economy grows, it needs additional currency. And if the dollar is that additional currency, it means that the U.S. has to have a chronic current account deficit, and that is not appropriate. So I think it's in our interest as well to reform the system.
At least in the short term, though, isn't it very convenient for America that the rest of the world is underwriting American spending right now?
Yes, it is. But the willingness to do so is greatly diminished, and I think that you will find that effectively China will buy less and less of the U.S. Government bonds because it will have a smaller surplus with the United States, because China will be diversifying. It will be lending to Brazil and South Africa and other countries in order to finance its exports to those countries. So I think this is a healthy, if painful, adjustment that the world has to go through.
If America doesn't actively take part in this sort of renegotiation of global finance, what will happen? What's your nightmare scenario?
Well, the Chinese will go bilateral. They already do it. They already have a clearing arrangement with Argentina, and I think they're working on one with Brazil, and you will find that there will be more and more bilateral arrangements. So the dollar will remain the main international currency, but its use will decline. So I think that a world of bilateral relations is less desirable than a continuation of a multilateral system. But the system we have now has actually broken down, only we haven't quite recognized it. And so you need to create a new one. And this is the time to do it.
In the United States, how worried are you about the budget deficit and maybe about the possibility of inflation?
Well, certainly a decline in the value of the dollar is necessary in order to compensate for the fact that the U.S. economy will remain rather weak, will be a drag on the global economy. China will emerge as the motor replacing the U.S. consumer. And of course it's a smaller motor because the Chinese economy is much smaller. So the world economy will have less of a motor. So it will move forward slower than it has in the last 25 years. But China will be the engine driving it forward, and the U.S. will be actually a drag that's being pulled along through a gradual decline in the value of the dollar.